You'll never measure up to your sister. The words sliced through the warm smell of roasted chicken before I even set my fork down. I kept my eyes on the mashed potatoes, pretending to stir in more butter while my pulse hammered against my ribs. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked past 6:37 p.m., each second louder than the next. My mother's voice carried the same sharp edge it always did when she talked about my sister, but tonight it felt different. Heavier, deliberate, meant to wound. The night my mother tried to break me, I revealed a secret that froze the whole table. Watch until the very last word. You won't believe what really kept this house standing. Across the table, the overhead light glared off the silverware, making tiny sparks on the knife resting by my plate. I stared at that reflection instead of at her smug smile. My father cleared his throat, the sound too quick and too forced, like a man trying to defuse a bomb he knew was already wired to blow. I lifted my glass of water and took a slow sip. Controlled. That's what I needed them to see. Inside, though, a thought flickered like a match. Not tonight. My sister Claire sat opposite me, flipping her hair back with the same careless grace she'd been praised for since childhood. She didn't even look up. He never had to. Mom always did the bragging for her. Promotion at work, new SUV, the latest vacation photos. Meanwhile, I was the quiet daughter, the one who helped out when she could, as Mom liked to put it. If only they knew how much help really meant. The smell of baked apples mixed with the faint metallic scent of the knife. My stomach tightened. I thought of the folder tucked inside my handbag hanging on the back of my chair. Thin, unassuming, but heavy with truths I'd kept hidden for years. Bank statements. Transfer slips. Every sacrifice documented in black and white. They didn't know it yet, but I was holding the winning card. Maybe if you were more like Claire, you'd have something to show for yourself, Mom added, slicing into her chicken with a deliberate sawing motion. My grip tightened around the glass. The cool condensation slid down my fingers, grounding me. Stay calm. Don't give her the satisfaction. Dad shifted in his seat. Helen, he murmured, his eyes darting to me. Let's just eat. But Mom wasn't done. I'm only saying what everyone's thinking. Her gaze locked on mine, daring me to argue. Some people take care of their family. Others. She let the sentence trail off like smoke. I set the glass down with a quiet clink. Others what? My voice came out softer than I expected, steady, almost gentle. That softness made her blink just once. Good. The kitchen seemed to shrink around us. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder, the ticking clock more insistent. Even the dog, usually stationed under the table for scraps, had retreated to a corner, sensing the tension. Claire finally looked up, brows knitting in mock concern. Mom, maybe. No, let her finish, I interrupted, my eyes never leaving Mom's. It sounds like you've been keeping score. A faint flush crept up her neck. I'm only pointing out facts. Facts. I nearly laughed. Facts were what I had in my purse. Facts she would never expect from the daughter she thought was always a step behind. I leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. Interesting. Because I have some facts too. The room shifted. Claire's fork paused midair. Dad's hand hovered over the salt shaker. Mom froze, knife poised above her plate. What kind of facts? She asked, her voice a half-second slower than usual. I smiled. Small, controlled, the kind that hides more than it shows. Oh, just a few things I've been keeping track of. Numbers. Dates. Payments. Nothing you'd care about. Her eyes narrowed. Payments. The word hung between us like a loose wire, sparking possibilities she couldn't quite grasp. Good. Let her wonder. Outside, a wind gust rattled the kitchen window, carrying the faint scent of rain. I breathed it in, steadying myself. Years of quiet sacrifice pressed against my chest. Late nights working overtime, weekends skipping outings to cover bills they never knew existed. And the biggest secret of all, the one payment that changed everything, waited silently in that folder, ready to explode their perfect narrative. But not yet. Timing was everything. Dad cleared his throat again. Maybe we should. No, Mom snapped, eyes still locked on me. If she has something to say, let's hear it. Her voice trembled just enough to betray a flicker of doubt. I caught it, stored it, savored it. I reached for my napkin, unfolding it slowly, buying seconds. It's funny, I said, dabbing the corner of my mouth, how people can assume they know everything about someone. They see what they want to see and call it the truth. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Is this about last Christmas? Because this isn't about Christmas. My gaze sharpened on Mom. It's about respect. And who really takes care of this family. Her knife slipped against the plate with a screech of metal on ceramic. The sound sent a chill through the room. I let the silence stretch until it felt almost unbearable. The clock ticked. The wind moaned against the siding. My heartbeat slowed to a deliberate rhythm. Finally, I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. You think you know what I contribute, I said quietly. But you don't. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Then enlighten me. Not yet. I kept my tone light, almost playful. Maybe I will. But not tonight. Her eyes flashed. Don't play games with me. Who's playing? I tilted my head, allowing a small, secret smile. I'm just saying there's more to this story than you realize. The air thickened, heavy with questions I refused to answer. I could feel Claire's gaze darting between us, searching for clues. Dad's fingers drummed nervously on the table. Inside I savored the shift. For the first time in years, Mom wasn't fully in control. She sensed something big, but she didn't know what. And that uncertainty was my hidden advantage. I glanced at the folder in my bag, just enough to draw her eyes to it. Her lips parted, curiosity flickering like a match. Perfect. Is that paperwork? She asked, voice tight. Maybe, I said, sliding the bag closer to my chair. Just some things I've been holding on to. What kind of things? I let the question hang unanswered. Instead, I reached for my fork and calmly speared a piece of chicken. The savory flavor grounded me, a quiet reminder of the control I now held. Mom's fingers twitched around her knife. If you have something to say, say it. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. All in good time. The tension pulsed like a heartbeat. Claire shifted again, her bracelet jingling against the table. Dad looked as though he might speak, then thought better of it. I placed my fork down with deliberate care. You know, I said softly, it's amazing what people can accomplish when no one's watching. Her breath caught. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I replied, leaning in until only inches separated us, that you might want to be careful who you underestimate. For a long moment neither of us moved. The wind outside howled against the windows. The clock ticked. Somewhere in the distance a car door slammed. Finally, Mom straightened, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. You've always had a flair for drama. I smiled again, the kind that promised more than it revealed. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned from the best. Her face tightened. A flush crept across her cheeks. The room held its breath. I could feel the weight of the folder behind me, the proof of everything I'd done, the secret that would soon turn their world upside down. But not tonight. Tonight was about planting the seed, letting it grow in the dark where fear thrives. I leaned back, folding my napkin neatly on the table. Dinner's lovely, I said, my voice smooth and steady. Really? Mom's eyes narrowed, searching my face for answers I wasn't ready to give. Across the table, Claire shifted again, finally sensing the storm beneath my calm. Dad stared at his untouched dessert, fork poised but unmoving. I rose from my chair, letting the wooden legs scrape softly against the tile. The sound was quiet but final, like the click of a lock. Where are you going? Mom asked, her voice sharper than she intended. I turned, hand resting lightly on the strap of my bag. Nowhere, I said with a small smile. Not yet. And with that, I left them sitting in the thick silence I had carefully built. An unfinished sentence hanging in the air, a promise of something far bigger than any of them could guess. I walked down the short hallway toward the guest room, the soft creak of the floorboards following each step like a quiet witness. My handbag, still heavy with the folder inside, pressed against my shoulder as if reminding me of the power I now carried. The smell of roasted chicken clung to my sweater, mixing with the faint scent of old furniture polish that always lingered in my parents' house. Behind me, the muffled scrape of chairs told me they were still at the table, probably whispering about what I had meant with my parting words. I didn't pause to listen. Let them wonder. Tonight was only the beginning. Inside the guest room, the overhead light cast a pale glow on the faded quilt Mom had sewn decades ago. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under my weight, and rested the bag beside me. My fingers brushed the folder through the fabric and 1,000 late nights came rushing back. Nights no one in that dining room had ever bothered to imagine. It started small, almost invisible. I thought back to the winter after Dad's first layoff, when the mortgage notice came with its bright red lettering. I was still working at the library then, barely making enough to cover my own rent. Yet I quietly shifted money from my tiny savings account to theirs. Just a few $100s, I told myself. Temporary. But temporary stretched into years. I could still feel the bite of those long evenings at the reference desk, the smell of old paper and cleaning solutions settling into my hair as I stayed late to pick up extra shifts. My co-workers would chatter about family dinners and weekend plans. I'd smile, pretending I had the same luxuries, while calculating which bill I could postpone to send a little more home. The first time I paid one of their overdue utilities, I didn't even tell them. I remember standing in the grocery store parking lot, phone pressed to my ear as a customer service rep confirmed the payment. The cold January wind cut through my coat, but a strange warmth spread through me, a private victory. They would never know the lights stayed on because of me. But one payment turned into another. Water. Gas. Difference. Always just this once, always with a promise to myself that I'd stop after the next paycheck. Yet every envelope that arrived in their mailbox seemed to find its way to me. Mom would sigh over the phone about hard times and unexpected expenses, her voice carefully casual as if she were talking about the weather. I never told my sister. Claire was too busy posting vacation photos from beaches I could only dream of. Her world was all new furniture and weekend getaways, while I scoured coupons and skipped dinners out. The few times she called, she spoke of promotions and spa packages, never noticing the exhaustion in my voice. There were nights when I'd come home to my tiny apartment and drop my purse on the kitchen counter, only to find a new late notice email blinking on my phone. My chest would tighten as I stared at the balance, knowing exactly where my next paycheck would disappear. The smell of stale coffee from my empty mug would fill the room, and I'd whisper a promise to myself that it would be the last time. It never was. Some sacrifices were harder to measure. I think of the day I canceled a long-planned trip with friends because Mom mentioned a medical bill that came out of nowhere. I remember the sharp disappointment in my best friend's voice when I told her I couldn't go. I told her I was just busy, leaving out the part where I wired half my savings to cover a hospital fee. Each choice felt small in the moment. One skipped dinner, one delayed purchase, but together they built an invisible wall around my life. While Claire was buying new cars, I drove the same aging sedan and prayed it wouldn't fail its inspection. When coworkers upgraded their phones, I clung to my scratched old model, the one I could still pay off in manageable installments. Through it all, I kept my face neutral whenever Mom compared me to my sister. At birthdays and holidays, she'd beam at Claire's latest achievement while I quietly passed the mashed potatoes and hid the calluses forming on my heart. The biggest sacrifice came 3 years ago, though no one in that dining room had any idea. It was a damp March evening, the kind where the sky looks bruised and the wind smells of rain. I was sitting at my kitchen table, a stack of overdue bills spread before me when Dad called. His voice trembled as he explained that the bank had sent a final notice. They were 30 days from losing the house. I remember staring at the grainy laminate of my table, tracing the scratches with my fingertip as he spoke. He tried to sound casual, even joked about tight belts, but I heard the panic underneath. When he hung up, I sat there for a long time, the refrigerator humming like a distant engine, my heart beating too fast. The decision came faster than I expected. I pulled out my checkbook, an old habit from simpler times, and began calculating. It wasn't just my savings I offered that night. It was every hour of overtime, every skipped vacation, every quiet compromise I had made for years. By morning, I had transferred $84,000 to cover the mortgage and late fees. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend. I simply called the bank, gave them the numbers, and asked them to keep my name off the records. The woman on the other end paused, surprised, before confirming the payment. When I hung up, I felt an odd mixture of relief and dread. Relief that my parents would keep their home. Dread that it would never be acknowledged. And I was right. Weeks later, when Mom called to say a miracle had saved the house, I bit my tongue so hard I tasted metal. Claire congratulated them on figuring things out, her voice bright with admiration. I smiled into the receiver and said I was happy for them. They never asked how it happened. Now sitting on the edge of the guest room bed with that folder by my side, I felt the weight of every silent year pressing down. My hands ached from gripping the strap of my bag, the faint scent of old paper seeping from the zipper. Down the hall, I heard the murmur of voices. Mom's sharper tones, Claire's higher pitch, Dad's low rumble trying to keep the peace. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught my name more than once. A faint, bitter smile tugged at my lips. Let them speculate. I thought of all the times I'd nearly broken my silence. The Christmas when Mom gushed about Claire's generous gifts while I handed over a modest box of homemade cookies, my bank account nearly empty from paying their heating bill. The summer barbecue when Dad bragged about Claire's promotion, unaware that I had just finished a double shift to cover their insurance premium. Each moment had been a small rehearsal for tonight. Yet something deeper than money kept me quiet all those years. Maybe it was the hope that love would one day outweigh appearances. Maybe I feared the ugly truth of knowing they valued my sacrifices less than my sister's sparkle. But tonight, as the folder rested against my thigh, I felt the tremor of change. My silence had protected them, but it had also trapped me. And now, after that dinner table insult, the trap no longer held. A soft knock startled me. Dad's voice came through the door, low and hesitant. "Honey, you okay?" I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "I'm fine," I called back, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Your mother, she didn't mean," he paused. "Well, you know how she gets." I closed my eyes, letting his words settle like dust. "You know how she gets." As if that excused years of cutting remarks and blind comparisons. "I'm fine, Dad," I repeated, firmer this time. "Really?" His footsteps retreated, leaving a silence thicker than before. I opened my bag and slid the folder onto my lap. The papers inside rustled softly, each one a record of the life I had lived in the shadows of their expectations. The numbers didn't lie. Every deposit, every transfer, every sleepless night was there in ink. Proof of a daughter they thought was ordinary but who had carried them all along. My fingertips lingered on the top page. Part of me wanted to march back into the dining room and spread these sheets across the table like playing cards, to watch their faces crumble as they recognized each figure. But not yet. This was my story and timing was everything. They had spent years underestimating me. Let them feel the weight of uncertainty a little longer. I slipped the folder back into my bag and drew a deep breath. The faint scent of rain drifted through the window, cool and clean. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of freedom, quiet but unmistakable like the first breeze before a storm. The faint scent of rain still clung to the guest room curtains as I rose from the bed, the folder secure inside my bag. My fingers brushed the worn strap one last time, steadying the tremor in my chest. I had promised myself I wouldn't act tonight, but the house felt different now, charged, expectant. Their voices carried down the hallway in hushed, uneven tones. The storm outside had begun to tap against the windows, a gentle percussion that urged me forward. I stepped into the hallway, the soft carpet muffling my movements. With each step, I replayed Dad's hesitant knock, Mom's sharp words, the years of silence behind them. My heart thudded like a slow drum, matching the rhythm of the rain. By the time I reached the dining room door, I no longer felt like the daughter who once tiptoed around their moods. I felt like someone holding a truth too heavy to stay hidden. The dining room smelled of cooling food and lemon polish. Mom sat rigid at the table, her posture straight as a ruler, eyes fixed on the folded napkin in front of her. Claire scrolled on her phone, pretending disinterest, though her shoulders betrayed a nervous stiffness. Dad stood by the window, peering out at the dark street as if an escape might appear. I pulled out my chair and sat without a word. The scrape of wood against tile cut through the silence. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, each carrying a different weight: defensiveness, curiosity, fear. I placed my handbag on the table, its leather damp from the humidity, and unzipped it slowly. The quiet sound of the zipper was louder than any accusation. Mom's gaze flicked to the bag, then back to my face. "You decided to rejoin us," she said, her voice clipped but trembling at the edges. "I never left," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I just needed a moment to think." Claire set her phone down. "About what?" I met her eyes, then Mom's. "About everything I've done for this family that no one seems to notice." Mom's chin lifted, a reflex of control. "We're grateful for anything you've contributed," she said, the words brittle as dry twigs. I slid the folder onto the table. The soft thud echoed like a door closing. Gratitude would have sounded different tonight. Dad turned from the window. What is that? Proof, I said simply. The word hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. My hands rested on the folder, palms flat against the smooth cardboard. I could feel the years of hidden effort beneath the paper. Late nights, missed opportunities, the quiet ache of sacrifices unspoken. Mom narrowed her eyes. Proof of what? I let the question linger, allowing the tension to stretch. Of things you never bothered to ask about. Bills paid. Mortgages covered. Choices you thought were your own. Claire shifted in her seat. What are you talking about? Numbers, I said. Dates. Payments. I tapped the folder. Facts. A flash of unease crossed Mom's face, quickly masked by irritation. This sounds dramatic. It's not drama, I replied, my voice low but firm. It's math. Rain pattered harder against the windows, a steady percussion that filled the silence. Dad moved closer, his brow furrowed. Why bring this up now? Because tonight, I said, meeting Mom's eyes, you decided to measure me against Claire. You made it clear what you think of me. I thought it was time you knew the truth about what keeps this house standing. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Her fingers tightened around her napkin until the fabric twisted. I slid the folder an inch closer to her. Inside are bank statements and transfer records. Years of them. Payments made quietly without a single thank you. Every time you thought a miracle saved this house, it wasn't luck. It was me. Claire blinked, confusion clouding her face. Wait, what? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the folder just enough for a corner of paper to peek out. Dates, amounts, account numbers in neat black print. I didn't reveal the largest figure, not yet. Let them feel the weight of possibility first. Dad leaned in, his breath catching as he recognized his own mortgage account number on the visible page. These are our statements. Yes, I said softly. Your statements. My money. The room seemed to contract, air thickening with shock. The hum of the refrigerator grew loud enough to feel in my bones. Mom's face went pale, her lips pressing into a thin line. You're exaggerating, she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. Maybe you helped once or twice. Once or twice. My calm cracked, just enough for a shard of anger to show. You really believe that? Claire's eyes darted between us. Mom, did you know about this? Of course not, Mom snapped, then turned back to me. If you were helping, why keep it secret? Because you never asked, I said. Because every conversation was about Claire's successes, her promotions, her vacations. Because whenever I tried to speak, you reminded me how I fell short. The words landed like stones. Dad's shoulders slumped. Claire looked down at her folded hands. Mom reached for the folder, but I placed my hand firmly on top of it. Not yet, I said. Her eyes narrowed. Why bring it up if you won't share? To show you there's more to me than the picture you've painted, I said. To make you understand that your judgments have always been built on half the story. Rain lashed against the window, a sudden gust that rattled the glass. The sound matched the quickening of my pulse. I kept my gaze steady, refusing to let her see the small tremor in my fingers. Dad sank into his chair, rubbing his forehead. I don't understand. Why would you do all this? Because you're my parents, I said quietly. Because I thought family meant helping even when no one notices. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the ticking clock. Each second stretched like a held breath. Mom's voice softened, but suspicion lingered beneath it. If what you're saying is true, what do you expect from us now? I studied her face, the faint lines etched by years of carefully controlled expressions. I don't want anything, I said. Not money. Not thanks. Just honesty. And maybe a little respect. Her eyes flickered toward the folder again, curiosity battling pride. I let her look but didn't move my hand. The real numbers, the late-night payments, the final mortgage transfer, remained hidden inside, a secret still mine. Claire finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How much are we talking about? I met her gaze but offered only a faint smile. Enough to keep this house standing. She leaned back, eyes wide. I had no idea. None of you did, I said. That's the point. Outside, Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and slow. The sound rolled through the room, a reminder that the night was far from over. I felt its vibration in my chest, steadying me. Mom exhaled sharply as if trying to release years of assumptions. "You should have told us. Would you have listened?" I asked. Her silence was answer enough. Dad reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. "Whatever the amount, we're grateful." I gave a small nod but kept my eyes on Mom. Her pride was a fortress and I could see the cracks forming. She wanted to ask, to see every page, to know exactly how deeply my sacrifices ran. But admitting that curiosity meant admitting she'd misjudged me all along. The rain eased to a soft drizzle, the house settling into a tense quiet. I closed the folder and slid it back into my bag, the papers rustling like a whispered promise. "You don't get to see everything tonight," I said, my voice calm again. "Some truths take time." Mom's jaw tightened. "Is this some kind of punishment?" "No," I replied. "It's a beginning." I rose from my chair, the legs scraping against the tile in a sound that felt final. "I'm going to bed," I added. "Think about what I've said." Their eyes followed me as I walked toward the hallway. Behind me, the clock ticked on, each beat marking the end of their perfect image and the start of a new, unsettled reality. As I reached the doorway, I glanced back once. Mom sat motionless, Claire stared at the folder-shaped shadow on the table, and Dad watched me with a mixture of regret and dawning respect. None of them spoke. I offered a small, unreadable smile. "Good night." And then I left them there, surrounded by unanswered questions, the truth only half revealed, and the sound of rain whispering against the windows like a secret they could no longer ignore. I closed my bedroom door with a soft click, but the faint murmur of voices drifted through the hallway. My mother's sharp tones rose and fell like restless waves, joined by Claire's nervous questions and Dad's low, weary replies. I pressed my back against the door and listened for a heartbeat. Their confusion pulsed through the walls, a living thing I could almost touch. The folder lay on the nightstand, a silent companion glowing faintly in the lamp's yellow light. I reached for it, fingertips brushing the edge of the cardboard. Hours ago, those papers were just records of sacrifice. Now they were ammunition, proof that the quiet daughter they dismissed had been holding the family together for years. I sat on the bed and opened the folder again, spreading the pages across the quilt like a deck of cards. Numbers and dates lined each sheet, crisp and undeniable. My stomach tightened as I traced the largest payment with my fingertip, the one that had stopped the bank from taking this house. $84,000. Every cent earned from overtime shifts, skipped vacations and late-night budgeting sessions. A low rumble of thunder rolled outside, shaking the old window panes. The storm had moved closer, the air heavy with the smell of rain. I breathed it in and felt something loosen inside me, a quiet permission to stop hiding. For years I had been the family's invisible safety net. Tonight I finally allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like if the world knew. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Claire lit the screen. "What are you trying to do?" I stared at the words, thumb hovering above the keyboard. 100 possible replies flashed through my mind, explanations, justifications, even reassurances, but none felt right. Instead I placed the phone face down. Let her wonder. A memory surfaced. Last spring, when Mom bragged to her church friends about Claire's promotion while I quietly covered another late insurance payment. I had stood at the edge of the conversation, smiling politely, my hands damp with frustration. Not one of those women would ever guess that the ordinary daughter had sacrificed more than they could imagine. Now those same friends could be my audience. The thought startled me, then settled with a strange sense of inevitability. They were the people Mom most wanted to impress. They were the ones who needed to know. I opened my laptop and the soft glow lit the room. The familiar social media homepage greeted me, cheerful and bright. My heart thudded as I clicked the button to create a new post. The cursor blinked in the empty text box, a tiny heartbeat urging me forward. Words came slowly at first, then faster. I wrote about the quiet daughter who paid unseen bills. I described late-night calls to banks, double shifts at work, and the single payment that saved a house no one else could keep. I didn't name names, but the details were unmistakable to anyone who knew our family. With each sentence, years of silence melted into sharp, deliberate truth. I attached a single photo, the top page of the folder, Numbers clearly visible but account details carefully covered. Proof without recklessness. Evidence without cruelty, at least for now. My finger hovered over the post button. Doubt flickered. Once I shared this, there would be no taking it back. Friends, neighbors, church members, they would all see. They would know who had carried the burden and who had taken the credit. I thought of Mom's smug smile at dinner, the knife flashing under the overhead light as she measured me against my sister. My hesitation dissolved. I clicked post. The screen refreshed. My story was live. For a moment nothing happened. The room hummed with the sound of rain against the window, the faint ticking of the clock. Then the first notification appeared. 1 like, 2 likes, a comment. Another comment followed, then another, names I recognized from church in the neighborhood. Messages of surprise. Questions. Words of support. A thrill shot through me, equal parts relief and fear. I had cracked open the silence and the world was responding. A sharp knock rattled the door. "What are you doing in there?" Mom's voice, tense and demanding. I closed the laptop and stood, smoothing the wrinkles in my sweater. "Just reading," I called back. The doorknob turned, but I had locked it earlier. "Why is your phone blowing up?" she asked through the door. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand, notifications piling faster now. I picked it up and saw her name in the call log. 3 missed calls in the last 2 minutes. Beneath them, messages from friends lit the screen. "Is this about your parents? I can't believe this story. You're incredible." A small, fierce satisfaction warmed my chest. For once, the narrative wasn't hers to control. "Open this door," Mom demanded. Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of uncertainty I had ever heard from her. I remained silent. Instead, I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the growing thread of comments. Old classmates, coworkers, even distant cousins chimed in with shock and admiration. Some offered to share the post. Others asked careful questions. Every message widened the circle of truth. Another memory surfaced. One of Dad standing in this very hallway years ago, shoulders slumped after another layoff. I had promised myself I would protect them even if it meant sacrificing my own dreams. Tonight, that promise no longer felt like a duty. It felt like evidence of a love they had mistaken for weakness. "Please," Dad's voice joined hers now, softer but urgent. "Honey, talk to us." I took a deep breath and opened the door a crack. Their faces appeared in the dim hallway light. Mom flushed and tight-lipped, Dad pale with worry. Claire hovered behind them, phone clutched like a lifeline. "What did you put online?" Mom demanded, pushing forward. "Something true," I said evenly. Claire stepped closer, eyes wide. "Everyone's texting me. Did you really pay for the house?" I didn't answer directly. "I shared facts," I said. "Facts you all ignored for years." Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Her fingers trembled around the edge of the door. "Take it down," she whispered. "Right now." "No," I said, my voice steady. "The truth stays." Her eyes flashed with a mix of anger and fear. "People will talk." "They should," I replied. "They deserve to know who's been keeping this family afloat." Dad rubbed a hand across his forehead. "We can explain." "No," I cut in. "You can't explain away numbers. They speak for themselves." A fresh wave of notifications buzzed in my hand, punctuating the silence. Claire glanced at the screen, reading the comments that kept flooding in. Her shoulders sagged as understanding settled in. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. My golden sister, the one who never had to wonder if she was enough. "Would you have listened?" She dropped her gaze, unable to answer. Mom's breathing quickened. "You're humiliating us," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "No," I said calmly. "I'm telling my story. The humiliation isn't mine to carry." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the hallway in a stark white glow. For a moment, we all stood frozen in the sudden brightness, the truth laid bare without a single word more. The thunder followed, deep and rolling as if the sky itself approved. Claire stepped back, her expression a mix of awe and guilt. Dad lowered his eyes, hands clasped like a man in silent prayer. Mom pressed her lips together, the fortress of her pride finally showing cracks. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving them in the hallway's dim light. Back inside the room, I placed the phone on the nightstand and watched the notifications continue to climb. Each new message felt like a small breath of freedom. I knew this post would spread by morning. Neighbors would whisper. Church friends would share. The story would reach people who once measured me only by what my mother said. Now they would see me through my own words. I turned off the lamp and let the glow of the laptop screen fade to black. The storm outside softened to a steady drizzle, a quiet applause against the siding. For the first time in years, I lay back on the quilt and felt no urge to defend or explain. The truth was out there now, untamed, undeniable, and finally mine. The glow of my laptop finally dimmed, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the siding and the steady buzz of notifications on my phone. I lay still on the guest room bed, eyes open to the dark ceiling, feeling the house breathe around me. Every creak in the floorboards, every shift in the old pipes carried a new meaning. For years this house had been a quiet burden. Tonight it was my proof. A light knock interrupted the rhythm of the rain. "Honey." Dad's voice, low and hesitant. "May we come in?" I reached for the lamp and clicked it on. "You can." The door opened slowly. Dad stepped in first, shoulders rounded, eyes tired. Mom followed, her face drawn tight, the glow of hallway light cutting sharp angles across her cheeks. Claire lingered behind them, phone clutched like a fragile truth she couldn't quite release. No one spoke at first. The only sound was the faint tap of rain against the window and the restless buzz of my phone on the nightstand. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We read what you posted." Mom's arms were crossed, but her grip on her sleeves betrayed a nervous tremor. "Everyone has," she said, her voice thin. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing." I sat up, folding the quilt across my lap. "Good. People needed to know." Her eyes flashed with the last sparks of defiance. "You embarrassed us." "I told the truth," I said quietly. "If that embarrasses you, it says more about the lie you built than the story I shared." Claire stepped forward, her voice softer. "Mom, she's right. We all saw the post. The numbers don't lie." Mom shot her a sharp look, but Claire held her ground. For the first time, my sister wasn't smiling. Dad moved closer, palms open. "We didn't know how much you'd done," he said. "We should have asked. We should have noticed." "You chose not to notice," I replied. "It was easier to believe the narrative you liked, the one where Claire was the shining daughter and I was just dependable." The silence that followed felt like a tide receding, exposing the wreckage beneath. Mom's voice cracked. "Why didn't you come to us sooner? We could have." "Could have what?" I interrupted gently. "Listened? Thanked me? You had years to do that." She flinched but didn't answer. I stood, the folder still on the nightstand. I lifted it and placed it on the edge of the bed where the lamplight caught the bold black numbers of the final statement. "Here's the full truth," I said, opening to the last page. "This is the payment that saved your house 3 years ago. $84,000. My savings, my overtime, my life, poured into keeping a roof over your heads while you compared me to someone who never lifted a finger." Claire gasped softly. Dad exhaled as if the air had been knocked from him. Mom's face went pale, her hand flying to her mouth. "That money," Dad whispered. "It came from you?" "Yes," I said. "Every cent." Mom sank into the chair beside the bed, her shoulders collapsing. I called it a miracle," she said, voice barely audible. "I told everyone God provided." "Maybe he did," I replied, my voice steady. "Maybe he sent me. But you never asked how. You never even thanked the miracle you were living with." Tears welled in Dad's eyes. Claire covered her mouth, staring at the figures that confirmed everything. Mom sat frozen, pride stripped away, the weight of her silence finally visible. I let the quiet stretch until the clock's tick became a metronome of their realization. Then I spoke the words I had carried for years. "I won't be doing it anymore." Dad looked up, alarm flashing across his face. "What do you mean?" "I've removed my name from every account," I said. "The mortgage, the utilities, the insurance. I called the bank tonight while you were arguing in the hallway. From now on, the house is yours to manage." Mom's head snapped up, shock breaking through her fatigue. You can't just." "I can," I said calmly. "And I have. Starting next month, every bill is your responsibility. No hidden transfers. No last-minute miracles." The color drained from her cheeks. Claire lowered her gaze, guilt flickering across her features. Dad pressed his palms together. "Honey, this will be hard on us." "It was hard on me," I said, a quiet steel in my voice. But I survived. Now it's your turn to learn what survival feels like. The room filled with the soft hiss of rain, a gentle applause for the freedom I had finally claimed. Mom's eyes glistened, but her pride kept the tears from falling. People will keep asking questions, she murmured. Our friends. They'll know the truth, I said. Maybe they'll finally see me for who I am instead of the version you invented. Claire stepped closer, her voice breaking the heavy air. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have seen how much you were carrying. I met her eyes and nodded. It's not too late to start seeing. For a long moment no one moved. Then Dad reached out, his hand trembling. We owe you everything. I looked at his hand but didn't take it. You don't owe me anything, I said softly. That's the point. I'm done paying. I'm done owing. A sudden calm washed over me, lighter than anything I had felt in years. The anger that once burned like a hidden flame now cooled into something steadier. Freedom. I gathered the folder and slid it into my bag. I'll be leaving in the morning, I added. I have my own life to build now. Mom finally spoke, her voice small. Where will you go? Home, I said simply. My home. The one I can afford because I no longer carry yours. Lightning flashed beyond the window, illuminating their faces. Dad's regret, Claire's quiet shame, Mom's fractured pride. For once, none of them had a script to follow. I turned off the lamp. Good night. They lingered a moment longer, as if searching for words that could undo years of neglect. None came. One by one they retreated, the hallway swallowing their silhouettes. The soft click of the door closing behind them felt like a lock turning in my own heart. Final, certain, freeing. The storm outside began to fade, the rain easing into a gentle drizzle. I packed my things slowly, folding clothes with deliberate care, each movement a quiet declaration that I was no longer theirs to underestimate. As I zipped the bag, my phone buzzed again. Another flood of messages from neighbors, friends, even distant relatives. Words of support scrolled across the screen. Proud of you. Finally someone speaks the truth. You deserve better. I set the phone aside and opened the window a few inches. Cool night air slipped in, carrying the clean scent of wet earth. I breathed deeply, savoring the smell of a world bigger than this house and the people who once defined me. For years, I had poured every ounce of myself into protecting a family that barely saw me. Tonight I had reclaimed every hidden piece. My sacrifices were no longer secrets. My worth no longer depended on their approval. I lay back on the bed, listening to the quiet drip of rain from the eaves. The house that once held me hostage now felt strangely small, like a shell I had finally outgrown. Tomorrow I would drive away. I didn't know exactly where the road would lead, but for the first time, the uncertainty felt like possibility rather than fear. My story belonged to me now. Every dollar, every choice, every word. As the last notification faded into silence, I whispered a final thought into the dark, a promise to myself and a farewell to the years I had lost. Never again. And with that I closed my eyes, power intact, heart unburdened, and a future wide open before me. If this story struck a chord in your heart, subscribe for more dark, emotional revenge stories. Every week I share powerful first-person confessions that prove it's never too late to reclaim your worth.